They really don't need any introduction, but I'll introduce them in any case briefly. Anna Kendrick singing up a storm as Cinderella, Rob Marshall directing to a furious and remarkable Fare Thee Well, the director, James Corden, who knew he sang in addition to everything else, as the baker, and John DeLuca, producer. So thank you all for being with us. John, I guess as the producer, it begins with you, possibly. Without the money, it wouldn't happen. Maybe you could just tell us what actually got this going. There had been several false starts before where we thought we were going to have a movie Into the Woods and we didn't. Why did it happen now?
Yes. Well, it really started with Rob and myself. We both had seen the show in '87, and as we do our projects together, we always have a dialogue as to what will be next, what we're thinking of, and as you know, musicals are near and dear to our hearts, and Into the Woods came up at one point. And as we investigated it, we just thought this could work. We could make this a film. Then we brought it to Disney, and they were on board, and we dove in. It was really just our discussions, and you know, we have long lists of ideas that we have, and Into the Woods rose to the top, and the more we saw it cinematically, the more we thought we could attack it and bring it about. Did it matter, John, what had been done previously, or did you just wipe the slate clean? Well, we did read the other script. There was one script that we did read, and it was in such a different direction that we just started anew. Mm-hmm. And with the original writer, James Lapine, and knew that we wanted to honor the original production as much as we could. And then, of course, Rob, you had the fantastic and enviable task of having to cast it. A wonderfully eclectic cast drawing from theater people, a Tony winner, a Tony nominee, and of course film stars. How did you think about getting that film-theater balance right for casting the film version of a Tony-winning musical?
It happened kind of actually naturally, in a way. You know, I have this sort of philosophy about casting, and that is that you don't have to, if you do it right, you don't have to make any decisions at all. They're made for you, you know? When we did a reading of the piece 2 years ago, and these two lovely people actually were in the reading, which was fortuitous. And, you know, it was in that moment that both James and Anna, it was clear that they were meant for these roles, you know. I love when actors say, "This is mine." And that's what, I mean, James came in, I knew his work on stage, I knew he was a brilliant comedian, but I had no idea that he had this amazing voice and also had such depth and vulnerability as an actor and sort of could sing. And I mean, his range is pretty extraordinary. And it was obvious to me right then and there that this is the baker. He claimed the role and said, "It's mine," and same with Anna. Anna brought such, and this is what they bring in the film too, but Anna brings such depth, such vulnerability, such complexity to this role, in addition to her humor and sort of a modern sensibility, which I love about her, and this extraordinary voice. It was sort of like, this is mine. And so that's what I always hope can happen. You know, musicals are still few and far between, so you have to do a little bit of detective work as you're trying to figure out who can do this kind of thing. I didn't know Emily Blunt could sing. I didn't know Chris Pine could sing. I knew Meryl Streep could sing, but I didn't know she could sing like this. And that was a huge surprise to see that happen.
Did Rob, Stephen Sondheim, who is famously protective and rightly so of his work, did he take a lot of persuading, given that there had been some false starts before?
No. You know, James, as soon as we decided we wanted to do it, I called James Lapine and I asked him to write the screenplay and asked Steve to come on board and help us as we maneuvered our way. You know, it's very delicate taking something from stage to film because you really want to honor the original, but you must serve it as a film as well. And they were incredibly flexible about it because they'd written it. You know, they said, well, we can rewrite this or do this. They still saw it as a living, breathing thing. There wasn't that protection that you think there might be. It was actually the opposite. I actually found myself saying, we can't touch that, don't touch that. That's, you know, we don't want to move that around. But, you know, you have to be very aware of the fact that it's a film. I mean, for me, on stage, it's, I don't know, was it close to 2 hours and 45 minutes on stage, something like that? And you know, and film musicals can't really sustain that kind of length. I mean, I feel like almost the length we are is really where it needs to be. I can't imagine it 10 more minutes, 15 minutes, even longer. So we were all very aware of that and aware that we needed to condense and adjust and make things work for film that are, you know, there are stage conventions that don't work on film, and you have to be smart about that.
Mm-hmm. James, in your extraordinary performance on stage in One Man, Two Governors, which I had the pleasure of seeing 4 times, you did almost everything except sing. Were you amazed to find yourself singing on screen, especially the work of Stephen Sondheim?
In a word, yes. You know, I think it was a little easier in one sense, because when I went to audition, for Rob and John, I wasn't auditioning for a huge movie starring Meryl Streep. Like, I was auditioning for a workshop for a movie that would, if it got made, star Meryl Streep, and if it does get made, it probably won't star you. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's sort of, and so I think I felt it was a little easier in a sense, but I remember it so vividly, every step of the way, really, to making the film. I remember walking up and down on the Upper East Side, because I'd got there so early because I didn't want to be late. So I just ended up wandering around, and then I remember going in. I remember talking with Rob and John. I remember thinking, this is the nicest place I've ever been in New York. And then I remember singing. And I remember, Rob, pretty much told me there and then, you said, well, we're going to do this workshop and we'd love you to come and do it. And then the week of the workshop, I don't think I've ever done something where I felt so immediately, oh, I understand who this man is. I understand that he is representing the audience. He's an everyman who is worried about the things that I've been worried about in my life. When you're having a baby, can I do this? Is this even something I'm capable of? And then he gets to kind of be this hero at the end, and I loved it. And then at the end of the workshop, Rob came and found me, and I can remember it so vividly. I can even remember what I was putting in my rucksack at the time. And he held my hand and he said, "I promise you, if we make this film, we will not make it without you." And lots of people say things like that in this industry, and lots of them mean them, but over time it gets watered down and it dissipates, and for whatever reason it doesn't happen. And I will always be indebted to Rob for it, and be just overwhelmed by what a phenomenal experience the whole thing's been, really.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, I guess as somebody who had a Tony nomination at age 12, it is fair to think of you as a Broadway baby. So you were an infant when this show first premiered, but did you know the show was a sort of part of your DNA in a way?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I saw the Bernadette Peters VHS when I was about 10, I think. And I, like many people before me, thought that the first act was the end of the show. And then I remember watching the second act and being kind of upset that this was happening to these characters, because they were characters I knew and loved, and people I liked. And I remember even at the time feeling very challenged by it and sort of grateful and thinking I should watch this one again when I'm older. And now, of course, it's the bit of the piece that is the most rewarding, and that's where all the thematic resonance really lies for me, and it's really the only reason that it should even exist, is to get to the meat of that second part of the piece, to see what happens when these characters are really tested.
we'll throw it open to the audience after this, but I just have to ask Anna, because you get to, on the steps of the palace, you get probably my favorite rhyme in all of Sondheim, which is the stuck with a shoe in a stew and the goo, and you've learned something too, something you never knew. What is it like to actually sing that? It's so extraordinary to hear.
It's funny because that is such a clever rhyme, and it's so clever that we talked about this in the recording studio, because it's almost too clever. And even while her withers wither with her is not quite as knowing and clever. And because it's so knowing, we decided to kind of play with the idea that, yes, she's singing and we exist in a world where she doesn't know she's singing. You know, she hasn't broken into song. She isn't, in real life, she's not speaking in rhyme. But it was just so clever and cheeky that we decided that Cinderella is sort of proud of herself for coming up with that line. And that was, because she's proud of herself for thinking to leave the shoe and finding a way to avoid making this decision. And then to, throw that rhyme in on top of it, it's almost like she's kind of showing off. So there was, it was kind of a playful thing. And it was great to be able to wink at it a tiny bit.
That's a wonderful answer, and it actually makes her high note at the end of the song that much more triumphant. It's like, look what I've achieved. I've done all these rhymes, and I'm on the steps of the palace. Okay, let's have some questions from the floor. Is there a roving mic, or do you just want to bellow? Yep, there you go.
Hi there, Tim Shipping from Holy Moly. I've been a Sondheim obsessive for a long, long time, particularly into the Woods. And so being an obsessive, I kind of thought there was no chance that you could make a film of this and not make a mess of it. But you've actually exceeded expectations, and I think what you've got here is a modern classic. So thank you for not ruining my favourite thing. I want to know, did any of you, and are you brave enough to admit, go into this thinking, film versions of musicals tend not to work, this will probably not work?
Well, I can answer that quite succinctly. There is one reason why it isn't, and it's Rob. That's it. There is no other reason, and it will embarrass him hugely, but I don't think anybody will ever, I can't even conceive of how you take a show that is 3 hours long, and like you say, beloved by so many people passionately, and you cut an hour and you don't lose a beat of story, a beat of heart, a beat of humour, and if anything, you go, I don't even know what I've really missed. And yet, it holds, and no one else can take credit for that, except for Rob, because it felt like, even on the first day in that workshop in an empty black room in the Juilliard in New York, that here was a director who has lived with this for a very long time and could see it on a canvas from such a great height that he could see exactly how an audience are going to react to things. And I can remember Rob saying to me, no one wants to see in a film 4 ballads in a row. Like, it will hold on stage because you're watching something very different. It's a personal interaction between you and the performer, and they're actually there and they're doing it. On stage, it's depreciating returns every time we do it. And he said it's all about protecting No One Is Alone, because that's the heartbeat of the thing. And you kind of go, oh yeah, sure, cool, yeah. And then I've watched other musicals since. I've watched movie musicals in the last sort of year and a half, and I've gone, you're completely right. The first ballad in this movie musical knocked the wind out of my sails. The second one, I was like, oh yeah, that's good. The third one, I'm like, whew. The fourth one goes for nothing, and that's not because the performances aren't right. They're amazing, but so to have a director who can do it and pull it off in the way that it's so wonderful for us to hear that. That's the reason. And I don't think there's anyone else on earth could do it. I genuinely don't know if anyone else could take this text and make a film that would work in this manner. Truly.
I wholeheartedly agree. Rob and I work, cheek by jowl through every process of the film. And for the last 3 years, it is a very difficult balancing act, this piece. The humor, the emotion, the depth of emotion, but yet the fairy tale aspect, the musical aspect, it's really difficult. And in terms of what James just said, Rob understood how to calibrate all those different aspects and make it a whole and make the tone work from beginning to end. And it was just breathtaking to watch him work.
Yes.
Go right under the table now.
Thank you. A question for James. You've obviously duetted with Gary Barlow. You've made a Sondheim musical. What's next on your wish list in terms of music? Solo album? History Boys the musical, maybe?
Musically, what's on my wish list? Well, I mean, almost for my own enjoyment, and when I say my own enjoyment, I mean just to record for myself, to keep in my house. I've started to think I should make a Christmas album because I love Christmas music so much. I start listening to it in October, and I started listening to the Bublé album. I'm very excited about going to see him at the O2 next week. I really love him, that I sort of have started thinking that maybe I'll just do it on my own. Maybe I'll just have yourself a, And so I might do that. You'll never hear it, but maybe I've got a feeling I might just do it for my own pleasure. Yeah.
Can I get in on that?
Yeah,
just
big
for
time.
us.
Hey,
Okay.
We'll do
Great.
Baby It's Cold Outside.
But I sing the guy part. 'Cause
You
I'm
sing
very
the guy
sexually
part.
aggressive.
Yeah, okay, great.
Great.
That's funny.
Yes.
Can I ask Anna and James, were you read fairy stories, folk tales when you were kids by your mum and dad or anything like that? Or did you read them yourself? And if so, what were your favourites? And what was the best bit in it for you? The gory bits or the nice romantic bits?
I wasn't read fairy tales per se. I mean, we were read bedtime stories, but they were. I've mentioned this to a couple people, and only one person so far has known it. I don't know if it's more of an American thing, but the Berenstain Bears books, and those are sort of stories.
3 Americans go.
Yeah, right. But those are sort of stories about little life lessons, and it's about sort of sharing and forgiveness. And they would particularly read me the story where Brother Bear does something mean, but Sister Bear forgives him. And I didn't like being read that story. So they would read me these stories to sort of show me, that family life is complicated and stuff. So it really wasn't the an oversimplified version of things. They tried to read me books with life lessons that I didn't appreciate. I would have preferred fairy tales.
I always remember finding them a little bit scary. I think that maybe because at school they started with Hansel and Gretel, which I think might be the darkest story you could ever read a child, where a woman locks them in a cage and then he puts a twig through as his finger. So I haven't read my son many, but I was having this discussion with someone earlier today, and he said, but I said, I find them a bit scary. And he said, yeah, but they always end so well. And I said, yeah, but that's I think, the best thing about what Stephen Sondheim has done with this is say these fairy tales that tell you that, I don't know if it's a particularly healthy thing to tell children that this notion of happily ever after will just exist forever, and that will be your life. And I think it's a wonderful thing in this film that in the song that I mentioned earlier, the No One Is Alone, there's a moment where they say, Anna's character and my character are talking to the young children saying, giants can be good and witches can be right, and you decide what's good and you decide what's right, which I've always sort of taken as essentially someone saying, which I think is a really positive message to say to children, to say, whatever your life is and whatever your circumstance, there's some screw-ups coming your way. You can't deny it. The screw-ups, they're coming for you. And in those moments when you feel like that, when life takes those turns, you're going to feel like you're completely on your own in the world. You're going to feel completely on your own. And you won't be. And you're not. Because no one is. And that's made me think about how I'll sort of read things to my children and the impetus that I will put on certain things. We are, though, currently reading a book called Barbar's American Adventure. When he gets to Los Angeles, we go to my son, amazing! Like that.
I too thought the film was very impressive, and the main part was that it actually caught the essence of the stage musical, which I thought in advance was going to be almost impossible. James, a question to you. Does it make you fancy starring in a big West End musical?
Oh, yeah. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I mean, it's all I've ever... my whole dream, all I wanted at school was to be in a West End musical, and then I was lucky enough when I was 17 to be in a musical called Martingale, which was, I'm not speaking out of turn to say it was a disaster, but I was in the chorus and was stood so far at the back. I mean, for a lot of the show, I could touch the back of the wall. That I remember very much having a feeling of going, so if I want to get to the front, I'm going to have to go and be on the TV and then come back. But I mean, I get a lot more excited about the prospect of being in a musical than I do almost about anything else, really. Like, there are so many shows that I love, and that's not including the new ones that haven't been written yet. But, like, a dream of mine is to play, like, Max Bialystock in The Producers is a role that I would give my right arm to play one day. Pseudolus in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is something I hope I will get the chance to do one day. When I saw Hedwig, I just was like, oh my God, this is the greatest part that's ever been written. There's a musical that Rob actually worked on in Broadway, which many people don't know here, called Kiss of the Spider Woman by Kandra and Ebb. There's a role of a guy called Melina, who's a imprisoned drag queen costumier, which I really love. That'd be a turn up, wouldn't it? So yes is the answer. It's all I hope so much that I would get to do any of those.
Gosh, I hope there's some producers in the house here taking notes. Exactly. It all sounds very tantalizing. Yes.
Rob, film audiences are getting used to the idea of movies in which lots of big characters come together in one film because of comic book movies and things like The Avengers. Did that actually have an impact on why this film came together now, this musical came to the screen now? And also, just quickly, I mean, did you decide to model Johnny Depp's look after Jack White from The White Stripes?
I didn't quite understand that second part about Johnny Depp and the waistcoat.
It was just he looks very much like Jack White from The White Stripes.
Right. Very good. White Stripes. I'll just answer that quickly. Johnny is a real creative force, and he loves to be a part of the creation of his look. That's a big part of what he does. And Colleen Atwood, our costume designer, and he have worked together for many, many years since Edward Scissorhands. And so he was always inspired by the wolf of the Tex Avery cartoons of the 40s. And if you know those cartoons, the wolf is in a zoot suit. And so that's why we went in that direction for this version of the wolf. The license being that it's seen through a child's eyes, so she sees this wolf in this way. So that was fun for him to create. And then the first part of the question was about sort of like the characters. I mean, one of the joys of this piece is this extraordinary ensemble of actors and characters. I mean, there are 19 principals in this film. No ensemble, no chorus, just that ensemble of principal actors. And, that's one of the great joys of this piece. And when we had time, which is very rare in a film, to rehearse like a company, which we had, that was one of the joys of this piece, I think, just being together and figuring out what we were going to do and making mistakes and falling down and getting up and figuring it out. And with a movie like this, it's very important that everyone's in the same film, and that's one of the trickiest parts about a large cast. You want to make sure that the tone is similar, we're all working in the same way. And that happened, I have to say, from the first day of rehearsal, have these incredible leaders. You know, I had James and Anna and Meryl Streep and Emily Blunt and Chris Pine, everybody there sort of leading the charge and giving everything they had. I mean, everybody was nervous, very nervous about it. I think we were all scared because we knew this is a beloved piece we loved, and we wanted to do it right and do it well. So we all sort of grabbed hands and jumped in together and did it. But that time, that precious time when you create a piece in rehearsals, was the foundation of what this film became.
Hi guys, congratulations on a beautiful piece of cinema. My question's for Anna. Obviously this is a film that blends two universal magics, fairy tales and music, and we've already heard about your kind of introduction to fairy tales, but I'm curious if you could share with us how you discovered the magic of music and what it is that excites you and makes you enjoy it so much, because it's such a huge part of your career at the moment, obviously.
Sorry, say that last bit again, sorry?
Just how you discovered the magic of music and what you continue to love about it.
I mean, that's a hard question. That's like asking my discovery of oxygen, water, and shelter. Those are all pretty good. I enjoy them. I mean, my mother maintains that the first song I ever sang was Lady in Red, and I fucking hate that song, so I don't believe her.
That will be on my Christmas album. Although not technically a Christmas song, red is very much a Christmas colour, so...
But, I mean, I think there were a number of people who reported back to my mother from school saying, Anna won't stop singing, that kind of thing. But, you know, those memories are like, I can't remember if I remember them or if I just think that I do because I've been told about them so many times. To be totally honest, I don't tell this story much because it sounds sort of fake, but I really was always kind of attached to the Little Red part because I saw the piece so young, and that's more in my vocal range, and being loud and bratty is more in my wheelhouse than being open and vulnerable. But there was some reason that I was trying to learn Steps of the Palace for fun or something years ago, and I remember that being the first time that I looked at a piece of music and thought, and really understood or began to understand the genius of Sondheim, because he writes your performance into the melody, and you have this amazing opportunity to work with someone and be elevated by this performance. There's never a part where you're going, oh God, okay, when this third chorus comes back around, like, how should I make that, make sure that has life and energy. It was like I was playing with the greatest tennis partner in the world, and it made it really difficult, but it made me do my best work. So actually on the Steps of the Palace, because it sounds fake, it sounds like I'm kidding. It was one of the first pieces that made me understand what music can do for you emotionally.
Yes.
Thank you. I grew up watching a lot of Disney fairy tale adaptations, and I never really bonded with Cinderella. So this is for you, Anna, because you really made me love Cinderella now. What for you drew you to the role, and what makes her so appealing now?
I mean, first of all, I'd say Sondheim is the person who drew you to this Cinderella because I'm playing a very, very different Cinderella. I'm not sure that I'd be able to achieve that if it would, just the first half of the piece even. I think that seeing what we think of as a kind of two-dimensional she sort of exists as a plot device in a lot of iterations. And to see the person that she becomes when she's faced with something much greater than herself and the decisions that she makes in those moments is much more interesting than her personal journey. Because once her personal journey is done, and Sondheim does put so much neurotic energy into her that she's a lot more fun to hang out with than most Cinderellas, I think. But to see the person that she becomes in the face of great tragedy is what makes her appealing.
That's a great phrase, neurotic energy, for so much of Sondheim. I love that. It's very true. We've got time for about one more question. There you go.
I just wanted to ask, John, you said that Disney came on board very quickly and easily, which surprised me because I didn't think I'd see the word Sondheim and Disney together any time quickly. So were you surprised by how quickly they took the project on? And also, where do you think it sits in terms of Disney's recent?
I don't think I was surprised because Rob and I had both worked with them prior on a film of Pirates of the Caribbean, and we had the greatest relationship with them. And we had a great trust with them, and they knew that we would treat this with integrity and with the respect, when a studio gives you the money, you take it and you do everything you can to make it work. In terms of, I don't know, it is an odd fit for what you think of as the old traditional Disney. But I think they were ready at this point to make that step into the 21st century with characters that were very near and dear to them. So, and they trusted Rob implicitly. So why not boldly take that step, as Walt did years and years ago with his classic now fairy tales, to make a new, journey into a new kind of unknown area where they had not gone before. So I was thrilled that they would take that. They were excited as well. So it was a nice journey for all of us.
Well, I think that trust that John talks about has been amply repaid. And on that note, we have to wrap this up, I'm afraid. But thank you all for coming, and many thanks to Anna, Rob, James, and John.
Great, thank you.